Hi everyone, Paul here from FamilyWheels.ca with another car review for your growing family. And this week on the program, we are in a car that we have had a ton of requests to review. It's the Highlander, and it's no surprise because this is very much a family-oriented vehicle. It's been around since 2001. This third generation came out in 2013, but we do have some pretty big changes for the 2017 model year, including a brand new engine, a brand new transmission. We've got new exterior styling, some interior improvements, the arrival of this new SE, more sporty trim that we're driving around this week, as well as some really excellent standard safety features, which are now coming on all trims of the Highlander. We do all of our standardized tests, so make sure to stick around. It's all coming up this week on Family Wheels. So let's get the basics out of the way first here with the Highlander. You can get into one of these things for $35,500. That's in the LE trim. But there's something to keep in mind with that vehicle is that you're not getting all-wheel drive on the base trim of this car. Although down in the States, you're also getting a 4-cylinder engine in their base trim. The tester that we're in here this week, as I mentioned, is this brand new SE trim. Costs around $45,500. It's basically like the XLE, which is the best-selling model of this of the Highlander, but it does have some extra little things like some blacked out rims, a more blacked out front grille. It's meant to just give you a bit of a sportier look, although nothing about the way this car drives in terms of its suspension or its engine tuning is any different to the other trims that you're going to get in the Highlander. You get into the highest level trim of this vehicle for about $50,000, and you can also get into a hybrid version of this car for about 50 grand as well. Now, while all-wheel drive doesn't come standard on this car, you're gonna have to spend an extra couple $1,000s more in the Highlander to get that. Standard equipment otherwise is pretty decent. You get this 3.5-liter V6 up here in Canada with this new 8-speed automatic transmission. You get a 6-inch infotainment system screen. You get 3 rows of seating as well. A lot of times competitors, you have to go to the higher level trims to get that 3rd row of seating. You get dual zone climate control, you get a rear backup camera, and then for the first time ever for the Highlander in 2017, you also get on all trims the Toyota Safety Sense package, and that gives you adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, pre-collision braking, pedestrian sensing, automatic high beams. This is the kind of kit that would have cost a lot of extra money up until really recently, but Toyota's making a push to make that far more mainstream technology, and we're seeing it here in the Highlander for 2017. One thing you're not getting as part of that package though, blind spot monitoring. So if you want to get that in a car, if that's something you like, you have to look to the higher level trims of this vehicle. I am finding that the adaptive cruise control here in the Highlander is a little bit jerky. You accelerate a little bit too quickly when you get up in front of somebody. You brake too quickly when you're coming up behind somebody who's going more slowly than you. This radar system could use some ironing out, particularly when you compare it to the competition like the Honda Pilot. I think they've got it better dialed in that company. But a lot of passive safety features going on behind the scenes here in the Highlander to keep your family safe regardless of the trim, and that's why the Highlander for 2017 has a top Safety Pick Plus rating from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. In terms of fun factor, don't expect to get your socks blown off here in the Highlander. It feels a little bit more utilitarian. The power is there, but it's not particularly exhilarating. And that makes me all the happier that this V6 comes standard here in Canada, because the base model in the States comes with a 4-cylinder, which I think would be incredibly underpowered. One thing I'm also a little bit annoyed about with this car is its 8-speed automatic transmission seems to be hunting around a little bit more than I'd like, just for that perfect gear, particularly when you're on steeper grades or more mountainous roads like we're on here today. But this power plant does give you enough oomph to tow 5,000 pounds, which is a pretty reasonably sized trailer or boat. And even the hybrid version of this Highlander can tow 3,500 pounds, which is enough for our modestly sized travel trailer. A lot of times you wind up throwing towing capacity right out the window when you go for a hybrid version of a vehicle. Not the case here in the Highlander. That's nice to see. And my fuel efficiency this week hasn't been particularly stellar. On pretty much a straight down the middle mix between highway and city driving, I've averaged about 11.5 liters per 100 kilometers. Toyota's saying you should see between 9 to 12 liters per 100 kilometers, whether you're on the highway or on city roads here in this car with this engine. I'm seeing more on the high end of that, and I'm not driving it that hard. If fuel economy is something that is more important to you, then perhaps look at that hybrid version of this Highlander, which should see about 8.5 liters per 100 kilometers, and still has an improvement in fuel economy, just a little bit for 2017, but a lot more horsepower coming out of that engine for this year as well. A couple of other little beefs about the Highlander in terms of the driving experience. First up is the steering feel, which is rather light and twitchy. I think particularly if I was towing with this, that would be a little bit bothersome. When you compare this to some of the other European competitors that are out there, like the XC90 from Volvo, it's a bit more sport tuned, a bit of a heavier steering feel. Another thing as well in the Highlander is that regardless of the trim that you choose, even the highest level trims of this vehicle don't have LED headlamps. You get LED tail lights, you get LED running lights, but you don't have the option. Only halogen headlamps are available in the Highlander right now, and they don't give you a lot of light. So at nighttime, you might find that this vehicle doesn't quite give you the kind of projection that many of the competitors have, which do have LED headlamps on board now. Aesthetically speaking, I really like the looks of the Highlander from the outside. It kind of has some lines to it that somehow throw back to the old Land Cruisers for me, but it also has this new spindle grille up front for 2017, which looks a lot like what we're seeing in the Lexus line of vehicles, and the back end on this car has just been ever so slightly aesthetically changed as well. Stepping inside, I've talked about how the interior of a lot of Toyota vehicles doesn't quite lock step with their exteriors, which are looking really good. It's sort of the same deal here in the Highlander. We've got a mishmash of switchware, some cheap feeling buttons around the shifting knob, and over here by my left leg at the driver's position, a lot of cheap plastics. We've got this old school digital clock right up above the infotainment system, which kind of dates the interior a little bit as well. Why not integrate that right into the infotainment system and clean things up a little bit here on the interior? Great little storage nooks throughout the interior of the Highlander. I particularly like this little shelf that's just below the infotainment system. We've got 4 USB ports now in the Highlander for 2017. That number's been upped, and I was wondering when I got into this car what this little plastic insert was just below the climate control functions. And it's actually, you can pop it out, slide your smartphone cords through this little plastic insert, clip it back in place, and then you've got a nicely integrated place to charge all of your devices kind of tucked away. That's pretty cool. Elsewhere here on the interior, seat comfort is kind of middle of the road. They're okay. I've been driving with you for a couple of hours now, and I'm not getting tired out, but I'm also not feeling like they're really hugging me through the corners or anything. Something that I'm disappointed to see isn't standard here on the Highlander is heated seats. You're getting this on a lot more of the competitors as standard equipment. You have to get into higher level trims on the Highlander to get them. You also get this sunroof on the higher level trims, but while many of the competitors are now putting panorama sunroofs, big, long panorama sunroofs that extend out into the back seats, you're not getting that here in the Highlander. It's just a more traditional sunroof that's right above the 2 front passengers. Well, since the Highlander is on the smaller end of 3-row SUVs that are out there, I was expecting that maybe the second row would be a bit of a squeeze, and this is one of the biggest surprises, and a pleasant one, that I've come across in the Highlander so far. I've got lots of headroom back here, and I'm 6'2", and lots of legroom as well, even with the driver's seat adjusted for a tall driver. Other nice little touches here in this SE trim include leather seating surfaces. They're very comfortable. We've got a couple of USB ports, we've got 3-zone climate control, and we've got these sunshades here as well if you've got a young kid who's sitting back here and is trying to have a snooze. Now, speaking of kids trying to nap back here, if you've got a young one who's in a rear-facing car seat, they don't fit too badly here in the Highlander, although you are going to find it's a little bit of a squeeze for front passengers. I've got about 9 inches of legroom up there according to our measuring tape. It means it's going to be tight for taller adults, certainly. Shorter adults will probably be okay, but even still, long road trips might feel like a bit of a squeeze in here with that rear-facing car seat flipped around. Here's something that I'm not so crazy about here in the Highlander with this SE trim, as well as the highest limited trim that's available in Canada. You can only get captain style seating in the second row, and it means that you lose one of your seating positions here in the middle. Now, if you've got 5 passengers regularly in this car, or if you like to have the family dog sitting across the bench here in the second row, you're not going to be able to do it. And it means that if you do have 5 passengers, that you're going to have to forego some of that cargo capacity in the very back of this vehicle to use the third row so that you can haul 5 people around. The other thing too is that while there are 3 seats available in the third row, that middle seat is going to be very tight for anyone beyond the smallest of kids. So really this does become in many ways a 6-passenger vehicle when you're looking at the highest trims of the Highlander. In the States, they've opted to bring back the bench seat as an option in higher trims, but you can't do that in Canada. Now let's take a look at how you get back into this third row. This is where things do get a little bit tight on you. You access it by pulling this handle right here. Seats slide forward, which is handy. And then if I go back here, you can see basically as an adult, I'm totally squeezed in back here. My headroom is limited. I have to put my legs off kind of on an angle just to fit in. If you do have shorter people sitting in the second row, you can slide the second row seats forward a little bit to give the third row passengers a little bit more room, but you can see what I mean. This is not a particularly comfortable third row, and that's where the size of the Highlander really starts to show. There are much larger 3-row SUVs that are out there that are going to make the third row a little bit more comfortable, so you have to weigh that out when you're looking at the options that are available to you. Well, here's something I like about the Highlander, which is a bit of a style cue from days gone by, and that's that you can access the trunk area not just by lifting the tailgate, but also by just lifting the glass by pressing this button here. Check this out. I like this for a couple of reasons. Again, if you've got the family dog and you don't want them jumping out into traffic, but you want to give them a pat, you can do that really easily here. Or say you've got a trunk full of stuff and you don't want it spilling out onto the road, but you just need to grab something quickly, you can do it by pulling this glass up. Another reason why I like this glass is because the optional auto lift tailgate takes its time here in the Highlander. To my count, it's about 8 or 9 seconds. That would get really annoying after a while, so it's nice to have that option of the glass to access things more quickly. Once we do have the tailgate open though, it takes a little bit, you can see that the trunk space is really impressive, about 1,200 liters, and it gobbles up our standardized trunk test really nicely. A soccer ball, a stroller, a couple of bags of groceries, a backpack, and a diaper bag. One thing I'm not crazy about here in this SE trim, we've already talked about the captain style seating. If you do have a family dog back here, and heaven forbid you were to get into an accident, they would go flying right through the middle here like a projectile. Or if you wanted to keep them from getting up front and say messing your seats, it's going to be a little trickier when you don't have that blockade of a full bench in the way. Also, if you've got, you know, a trunk full of groceries or whatever, again, it's more likely to spill over into the space up front. So a bunch of reasons why I'm not crazy about this captain seat configuration here in the Highlander. But all in all, even though we do have a third row of seating here hiding away right now, tons of trunk space, way more than I was expecting. And that third row does come up really easily. Once you have it up, you're not going to have much trunk space behind it, but that's kind of the case with all SUVs, particularly the size of the Highlander. Well, a big part of my job as a car reviewer is to point out the weaknesses in a vehicle, and there are no shortage of weaknesses here in the Highlander. Fit and finish isn't great, it's not particularly exciting to drive, but what's interesting here is that ultimately I wouldn't be surprised if this wound up being our next vehicle. It's reliable, it's got great resale value, it's got good towing capacity, excellent interior space, it's safe for families. I get why people buy this car and why it's become so popular in the Toyota line. For me, I would say though that if you're looking at this car, instead look at the slightly lower level trims of the Highlander. About 45% of these vehicles in Canada are sold in the XLE trim. If you want to spend 50 grand on a luxurious 7-passenger SUV, spend an extra 8,000 more and look at the XC90 from Volvo. Instead, for me, especially because you can't get that bench seat in the second row on the higher level trims, I'd go more middle of the road here on the Highlander if it were my money. But I'd like to know what your thoughts are on this vehicle. Please leave a comment below, subscribe while you're at it, And then head over to familywheels.ca for our bullet point report card on the Highlander, what we liked, what we aren't so crazy about. Next week on the program, a vehicle that perhaps you're cross-shopping with the Highlander, the 2017 Honda CR-V. It's going to be completely redesigned. We'll let you know how that one stacks up. Until then, have a great week, and thanks for tuning in.